Thanks, Ann, and thanks for joining us, everyone. Uh, and thanks for joining us for this next edition of Selections from the Collection, where we take a closer look at revolutionary women. While we're exploring these objects today and topics, keep in mind that in the era of the American Revolution, societal norms excluded women from participating in public affairs. But women of that era worked around, challenged, or flat out ignored those norms in service to the ideals of the American Revolution. And historically, preserving their stories was not always a priority. And as a result, we know a limited number of them today. Discovering women's contributions to and experiences of the revolution is not always obvious, but by taking a closer look at the documents and artifacts available to us and expanding the idea of what it means to be revolutionary can be revealing and bring more of their stories to light. And if you did join us for the last installment of selections from the collection, you're going to see some familiar objects. So for those of you who might know the history of some of these objects already, we thank you for your patience while we explore them for some of the newer audience members. So with that, we're going to dive right in. Drew, if we could go to the overhead. Thank you, Jacob. So this is one that if you joined us last time, you'll remember. This is the September 1773 edition of the Gentleman's Magazine out of London, and it pretty remarkably contains the poem On Recollection by a young Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis was actually captured in Africa about 12 or 13 years old in 1761, and she was brought to Boston where she learned to read and write English. And at a very young age, she showed an aptitude for reading and writing and artistic abilities. And so she was actually the first African American woman to have her poetry published in what would become the United States. This is pre-revolutionary. Phyllis really gained international notoriety. She traveled to London to showcase her skills, and she was published in the Gentleman's Magazine multiple times. And about the time that this appeared in the Gentleman's Magazine, her first book of poetry came out. She was a pro-revolutionary, and she actually wrote a poem called His Excellency General Washington, which Washington received a copy of, and he gave it public praise. And he and Phyllis Wheatley actually corresponded during the war. So she's a pretty remarkable example of a woman who was having her writing appear in publication under her own name. And, she lived through the revolution. She gained her freedom during the war years and actually remained in the United States and lived into the 19th century. So Phyllis's story in and of itself is pretty remarkable, but she is also emblematic of how a lot of women were able to participate in the public sphere. They weren't able to be part of the committees of correspondence or publish treaties or publish articles in magazines or newspapers, sharing their thoughts. But other women, such as Mercy Otis Warren, followed the same kind of path that Phyllis Wheatley did, in that if they put their thoughts and writings into a more artistic form, they did see print sometimes. So, Phyllis Wheatley is making it into the Gentleman's Magazine. Mercy Otis Warren, who was the husband of Joseph Warren and the daughter-in-law of Dr. Joseph Warren, she wrote several plays and several poems that were published in the years leading up to the revolution that were very pro-revolutionary and very anti-British. If she had just written those, in manuscript form, they probably would not have seen the light of day. She did write some more direct things, but she had to have them published anonymously. But poetry and other things like that is one way that women were able to find their words showing up in print. And we are grateful to Dr. J. Fred Olive III of Alabama Society, Jim Maples of the Alabama Society, and Dr. Keith Weisinger of the Washington Society for donating this copy of the Gentleman's Magazine. You, Jacob. Here is another object that if you joined us last time, you'd be familiar with. This is a 1770s fragment of chintz textile. This textile would have actually been produced in India for the European and North American market. And it was very popular because these hand painted decorations on here were put on with a technique and a dye that would actually remain in the fabric even when they were washed. Prior to this, a lot of European textiles, if you would wash them, the dyes and the colors would run. But this floral pattern like this was very popular in Europe and in North America, and it was imported by the yard into North America. So within the household, women were typically the chief consumers. They were really picking the type of decorations that were going to be in the household and what the clothing was going to look like. So fabric like this could be turned into a men's waistcoat, a woman's dress. It could be turned into curtains or fabric to go around a bed. It would have been very popular. But with the First Continental Congress and the non-importation agreements, textiles like this would have been seen as unpatriotic following that non-importation agreement. And so to wear this during the war years would have been seen as a unpatriotic act. So this really became a politicized and a political act to be seen in public wearing a textile like this. And after the war, though, taste of Americans went back to the pre-war years, and in the federal era, you would see textiles like this appearing on the streets again of American streets, on the streets again of American cities, pardon me. But so really with that First Continental Congress and the non-importation agreements, everyone who was in that room were men who made that agreement, but really it was the women who were the chief enforcers of that boycott. And so along with, boycotting this fabric, American women also started producing what was called homespun. There's very few examples of that in existence, but it was very fragile. Uh, but so it was not only boycotting those imports from England, but it was also producing homemade alternatives. Okay, and as part of producing those homemade alternatives, women would also be involved in the production of those fabrics. And they would have been using tools such as this one. This is called a flax hetchel or heckle, depending on the region or dialect. But really, what this is a tool that is used in the production of flax and hemp. And we're grateful to Bob and Jane Cohen of the Texas Society for donating this one, which likely dates from the second half of the 18th century. But the growing of flax for linen or hemp for making rope or other more coarse materials is a very laborious process. And in the 18th century, women and also children were primarily responsible for growing it. It's a low growing plant to the ground. So the thought was that people who are a little bit shorter, it's easier for them to kind of bend over and work with the plant and to weed it as well. But after it is harvested, it is dried and then it goes through a process of what's called breaking, where you actually break the outside of the woody stalk off of the interior fibers. And then once those fibers have been separated and cleaned, you would use a hetchel or a hatchel like this. It could be mounted on a table through these holes right here, or sometimes you would have it sitting on your lap. And you would take those fibers and pull them across these nails or spikes rather. And you can see it's really just a bed of spikes in there. And what that would do is to help straighten the fibers. And typically in a farm, you would have a series of these. And for each time it went through a different phase, there would be more and more spikes, which would create a finer and finer fiber. So Following First Continental Congress and those non-importation agreements, which excluded chintz textiles from North America, you would have groups like the Daughters of Liberty would start having spinning parties in which they would be working with wool and as well as flax, and they would be preparing it for spinning. They would prepare the fibers, they would spin it, they would make it into flax fibers, which are ready to be spun into linen. And these became very important for the domestic trade and then also for use during the war years to make textiles at home. The vast majority of textiles in North America prior to the Revolution were coming in from England. So women were also working on farms using hetchels like this to produce hemp fibers, which were very important for rope production. A full-size naval ship could use up to 2 miles of rope. So as the Continental Navy and all the different privateers are trying to outfit themselves during the war, that homegrown domestic production of rope is going to be really important. So give you one more look at this. And this one is likely from Southeast Pennsylvania based on the design. It has these little hearts right here and a bit of a floral pattern here on the end. You can see they really took pride in the tools that they were working with. Okay, thank you, Jacob. So women were really helping to drive the domestic economy, and women were also involved in some other ways that we might not expect. This is a 1774 $2 Maryland piece of currency. Get this a little lower for you so you can get a better look. Thanks for your patience. There we go. Uh, so each colony going into the Revolution was really producing their own types of currency, and these would have been um, passed by each colonies and now States General Assembly and then printed domestically. And what's really remarkable about this piece of currency can be found here on the back. Flip it around here so you can see it. Is at the top here. It says printed by A.C. and F. Green. So that is for Anne Catherine and Frederick Green. Anne Catherine Hoof Green is actually the only woman credited with printing currency in colonial America. She was born in the Dutch Republic and moved to North America with her husband, Frederick Green, and they ran a printing company. Frederick actually died in 1773, just before this note was printed, and he died deeply in debt. And he left the business to Anne Catherine, and she decided to take it over. And she had actually worked herself out of debt within 8 months and continued printing with her husband's name on there. She printed this currency for Maryland. She also printed broadsides for the state of Maryland. She also was the second woman in North America to be editor of a newspaper, and she also was a official printer for the Maryland legislature leading into the years of the war. So this is an example where Anne Catherine would not have been able to start a printing company by herself or, a print shop on her own. It was a business she had done with her husband, and by leaving his name on there, it kind of made it socially acceptable for her to be the head of a company. And eventually, one of her six children actually came on and helped her run it as well. But it's an example where, Anne Catherine kind of worked within the social constructs, but pushed some of those boundaries and became a very successful businesswoman. And she was actually so successful, she had earned enough money to hire one of the most prominent American artists, Charles Wilson Peale, to paint her portrait. So we'll take one last look at the front of that. So Anne Catherine Hoof Green, very remarkable woman, and we are grateful to P.G. Davis Wright of Delaware and Paul Callahan of the Michigan Society for donating this. Okay. Let me move the camera up for you here so you can see this next object. So another object may not have been expecting to see today. This is a circa 1770s iron gang bullet mold. So in July 1776, the Declaration of Independence is passed by Continental Congress, and it makes its way to New York City, where the Continental Army is then occupying Manhattan. And General Washington orders the Declaration of Independence to be read to the soldiers on July 9th, 1776. So the soldiers were supposed to gather, hear the declaration, and then return to their posts. However, they were so excited, a group of them broke off and went down to the waterfront where they used ropes to topple a 4,000-pound equestrian statue of King George III. This is a pretty famous event in early revolutionary history in New York. This was a large statue that was gilt of George III. It was there to celebrate his reign, but also to remind the population who was in charge. So it was gilt with gold on the outside, but inside, as I said, there's 4,000 pounds of lead. So those Patriot forces pull that statue off its pedestal, break it up, and they send the chunks of it to Litchfield, Connecticut, where the local women would have worked using bullet molds like this one. And they made over 42,000 musket balls out of that statue. And there's been some archaeological digs at Revolutionary War campsites, and that statue has such a unique chemical signature. They've actually been able to identify that those musket balls did make it into the hands of soldiers, and they know that they were being used in the field. And there are period prints really showing, the Daughters of Liberty. They're showing a colonial woman with a tricorn hat and a musket and a powder horn, and women were really stepping up and getting their hands dirty, so to speak. They were really taking part in that military buildup. Um, this is likely a gang bullet mold, and it's called that because you can see it would make 12 musket balls at a time. And so they called it a gang because when you close this and you poured your lead along the top here, it would make the musket balls and they would all be connected by a strip of lead on the top. And so part of the job that those women in Litchfield, Connecticut were doing was to open this, pull it out, and they would cut the individual musket balls off and sand the tops down so it wouldn't wear out the inside of the gun barrels. This one, if I can get it up here so you can see it, is actually marked right here on the handle, XVI. So we don't know for certain, but there's a chance that that is a company number or maybe a regiment. And it is likely that this one was used during the Revolution. This is the type of a bullet mold that would really serve, a company up to 100 men, maybe even a full regiment. But kind of an unexpected way from what we think of for women being involved in the revolution. They were really in there, getting their hands dirty and making ammunition. Thank you, Jacob. Okay, so what we have here, this is called a stay busk. Set it down here and move the camera, you get a little bit better angle. So a stay busk is part of a woman's corset. Trying to get this to focus for you. There it is. So when a colonial 18th century woman would get dressed, part of her undergarments were to put on a corset, which would promote a slimmer waistline and more upright posture. And a stay busk like this is going to be one of the last pieces that goes into it. This would slide into a pocket in the front, and what it would do would be to push on the woman's abdomen, further promoting upright posture. So this one is actually dated. It's hard to see right here, 1770. Let me flip it over for you. You can see there, SB 1770. It was very popular for men who were going away on military campaign or if they were going to go serve on board of a ship. to carve a stay busk like this for their romantic partner. So whether that's a girlfriend, a fiance, a wife, they would carve this by hand for their for their romantic partner. And the idea was that they would have something made by the man close to their heart at all time while they were gone. And so um, this one likely comes from Southeast Pennsylvania. These are very popular pinwheel designs that were really coming over from Germany. So part of that, German settlers in that area. But what this is also emblematic of is that a lot of men are leaving to go serve in the military or as privateers or in the Navy during the Revolution. And so women are staying at home and they're taking over, sorry, not taking over, taking on the responsibilities of the household. They're running farms. Oftentimes, they're raising several children who are also going to have to step up. Um, but women were really taking on a lot of the responsibilities in local communities and local households, and especially farms, to keep the economy and to keep households running. And we are very grateful to the Missouri Society for donating this. Give you one last look on it. Bring this up here. You can see the date on the front. And one last note on this, we wish we knew who SB was. Unfortunately, we will probably not be able to determine that, but we're glad that this one is at least dated so we know the era. Okay. So as part of that increased responsibility that women are taking on, let's see here. I think I'll just try to get one on the screen at a time for you. Um, they're going about their daily lives. A woman may have worn a pair of these. These are 1760s pockets. We are very grateful to First Lady Mary L. Addington, Priscilla Silagili Tommy, SAR First Lady 2016 to 17, Lisa S. Gregory of the California Ladies Auxiliary, and Stephen and Jacqueline Miller for contributing these to the SAR collection. So these are, as I said, a pair of pockets. A woman would wear these underneath her dress, but over her undergarments. So these would actually be accessible through slits on the exterior of the dress. And these actually do open up. Let me show you in here just a little bit. You can see they are quite cavernous. These are likely ones that would have been worn by a little bit more well-to-do woman from a wealthier family. They are silk on the front, and you can see on the inside they are dyed, which would have also been a little bit more expensive. But then on the back here, you can see they're just plain linen because this would not have been seen or this would not have been seen by somebody in public. But if a woman is in the household or out and about and she reaches into that opening through her dress, there's a chance somebody might see this part of the pocket, so you still want it to look nice. But what these really are is a way for a woman to go into the world and to take all the things with her that she needs. These two would have originally been connected by a strand that would have come across here, and you would tie it on just like an apron. And these pockets would hang at the outside, much where pockets are located today. And actually, women wore pockets up until about World War One, really in that traditional standard. But these pockets really would have symbolized, a level of independence and autonomy for a woman to be able to go out into public to conduct her business. So some women were acting as what were called camp followers. So they were supplying the soldiers with everyday things like cooking, cleaning, things like that. They were also acting as sutlers. They would bring, kind of domestic goods that the soldiers might want. That the soldiers might want soap, uh, light tools, forks and spoons, things like that. So they would have been using these pockets to conduct that business. And so in them, you would find things like currency, letters, and we actually have a few other examples of some types of things that you might find in these pockets that would help a woman go about her daily business. So one of them might be a snuff box. Uh, Thanks to Tony L. Bovetz, the second of the Louisiana Society, for donating this one. This is just a very simple brass snuff box. And so in the 18th century, it was socially acceptable for a woman to take tobacco, but it was not acceptable for a woman to smoke. So women would take snuff sometimes, and that would be something you would find in the pockets as she's going about her day. It's kind of a little comfort thing. But actually, this was the taking of snuff was coming all the way from the top, so to speak. Queen Charlotte, who was George III's wife, was actually known as Queen Snuff sometimes because she was known to take so much snuff during the day. And a very well-to-do woman would be able to reach into her pocket, pull this out, open it, and take a little pinch of snuff to take all with one hand without breaking conversation or polite society. But that's something that you might find in a woman's pocket. Another might be a magnifying glass. So, just like today, as you age, our eyesight gets a little bit worse. And so, as a woman is going about her business, she might need uh, a magnifying glass like this to read a document. Or if she's going to a merchant and she needs to look over her account with that merchant, she might pull this out to take a look at the numbers on the page, or it might be to read a letter, or if she's going to read a newspaper, whatever it may be. There are hundreds and hundreds of uses for a magnifying glass, and I will move this up and down a little. You can see it actually still works. This one is German and probably dates from between 1700 and 1750. A lot of optical equipment from that era is coming out of Germany. You can see it still has its original handle on here, but this is something that we know a lot of women of that era would carry these around. Um, to have glasses, those were prohibitively expensive for quite a few people, so you would leave those at home, but this is something you could take with you as you went about your day. And we are grateful to the late Dr. J. Fred Olive III of Alabama Society for donating that looking glass. One more thing you might find in a woman's pocket is a pocket knife. This one is of a form that was very popular from the early 1700s all the way up to about 1840 in both England and in North America. You just have a very simple wooden handle with a blade that just flips out. This is not spring loaded, it just sits there. This one does have a mark on it. We're still trying to figure out who that might be. But this is something that we know women would carry in their pockets. And this isn't so much for self-defense, although it could serve for that. But this is really, just something handy to take with you throughout the day. Could be used as a penknife if you need to sharpen your quill. It could be to cut, a loose thread off of your dress. It could be really any number of things that you might need it for. But a lot of women in that era would carry a small pocket knife like this with them throughout their day in their pockets. And we are grateful to Paul and Keitha Callanan of the Michigan Society for donating this pocket knife. Okay, let me switch these out really quick. Thank you, Jacob. Okay, Drew, if you want to come to the overhead quick. Do this. So get, oh, there we go. So a musket might not be something you were expecting to see today. We pulled this one out. This is a French model, 1766, donated by Jim and Terry Lindley of the Washington Society. And this is the model 1766 was the most widely used pattern of musket used by the Continental Army. That was kind of a mouthful. This is the one, the type of musket you would find in the most number of hands in the Continental Army. And we pulled this one out to talk about a woman named Deborah Sampson. She was born in 1760, and at a young age, her parents had fallen on hard times, so they had signed her up for an indenture at a farm where she was forced to work until she turned 20 years old. So she is working there, and from what we can gather, Deborah was not happy with her lot in life. So as the war is going on, when she turns 21, or at the age of 21 in 1781, Deborah disguises herself as a man and enlists in the 4th Massachusetts Regiment, where she actually makes it into the light infantry. The light infantry would have been carrying, they would have been given priority for muskets like this. The Model 1766 is known for being lighter and more agile. And although for the French military, this was an outdated weapon, for the Continental Army, this is really top of the line. So Deborah is serving under a pseudonym. Obviously, she didn't enlist as Deborah. Her pseudonym is escaping me right now. I apologize. But so she's serving in the light infantry, which is a specialty unit. You had to be between a certain height and you had to have extra physical abilities to be able to march on lighter rations, to march further distances. So, in a way, it's really an elite unit. So, Deborah maintains her secret for over a year, and she is actually serving in the Hudson Highlands. So this is between New York City and West Point. At this point, this is after Yorktown, so the Continental Army is surrounding New York City. They're really just keeping the British pinned in. But Deborah is sent into what is called neutral territory. So this is the territory between the Continental Army and the British lines. And Deborah is on a command with 30 soldiers actually serving under her when they run into some loyalists. And while they are skirmishing, Deborah's actually hit in the head with a sword where she receives a gash and she's shot in the leg, in the thigh, actually. So she knows that if she goes to the hospital tent, the gig is up. They're going to discover her. So she actually wanders off by herself and digs the musket ball out of her own leg to maintain her secret. And she actually continues serving in the 4th Massachusetts until later in 1782 when she falls ill and she actually is incapacitated and is actually goes into a very short coma, so to speak. And it is then that the doctors discover her secret. But she is honorably discharged. And in 1807, she is granted a disabled veteran's pension. So she is one of the first women to serve in the United States military. And she's also one of the first women to receive a military pension. Um, and so uh, we can't, sorry, Deborah did not serve with this particular musket, but it is likely that her unit would have been carrying pattern 1766s. Possibly she may have been carrying a British pattern 1769 infantry musket, but we got this one out as an example of the type of weaponry that she likely would have been using. Okay, go back to the overhead, Drew. So this is another object that if you joined us last time, you know the story of a little bit already. Um, but this is what's called a sampler. Trying to get this to show up a little bit better for you. So this one was created or completed by Hannah Prince in 1787. Hannah Prince was born on March 19th, 1775. So we just missed her 250th birthday. But she's actually born in Marblehead, Massachusetts, 1 month before Lexington and Concord. So she got to live for 1 month in pre-revolutionary America. But Hannah grows up in Marblehead with several of her uncles and cousins serving in the Continental Army, in the Continental Navy, in the Massachusetts Navy as privateers. So her family is very heavily involved in the Revolution. Hannah, meanwhile, stays at home and is growing up in the midst of the war. And although the war was going on, Hannah still learned all the skills that she was going to need to be a successful woman in colonial and early federal America. So this sampler she completed when she was very young, and she may have even started it while the war was still going on. While it's very, visually stunning to look at, it's also serves as Hannah's resume. So it's showing that she has taste, she can spell her name, she knows her numbers. And what's remarkable about this is that there are insects on here. There's also birds. Get this around here so you can see it. That Hannah would not have been interacting with in Marblehead. So we can also kind of surmise that she's looking at artwork or she is looking at books. So while this is a pretty piece of folk art, it's also really showing all the skills that Hannah has, and for her time, it's showing that she has all the requisite skills to run a household as a wife. So this would have hung in the family's parlor, and it's really serving as a way for young suitors to come over and know that Hannah is a very eligible and desirable potential partner to help run a household. And so we don't know what happened to Hannah after the war. There are very scant records. We do know she got married and lived into the 19th century, but there were a lot of young women who grew up during the Revolution, like Hannah, who stayed at home. They helped run their households, and they were also preparing, to lead the next generation. And we are very grateful to the Ladies Auxiliary of the Texas SAR for contributing this stunning sampler. Okay, thank you, Jacob. This camera adjusted for you so you can see what we're looking at here. This is trying to get that to focus for you. We're looking at a 1780s silver and garnet lace pin. This is very small. I'm trying to get this to show up for you as best I can. So what a lace pin is just a very simple open frame with a pin that sticks out like this. And the way it would work is that you would bunch fabric through it this way, run the pin through the fabric, and you could pull it back. And that would, help to hold on a sash or a kerchief or even a head wrap. These were also very popular to wear just as ornamentation on clothing. And this particular one, which we are grateful to the National Ladies Auxiliary for donating, is similar to types of jewelry that we know Martha Washington was importing to Mount Vernon. Martha Washington really enjoyed silver and garnet jewelry, and she actually gave a similar shaped pin to George that we believe he wore at his second inauguration. And so that's emblematic of ways, women like Martha Washington, who are, married to what we call today the founding fathers, they're working behind the scenes to make sure that, the young United States appears, not that they appear, that they do not appear to just be provincial. This was a criticism that was coming from a lot of European leaders that these young upstart Americans are provincial, they are backwoods farmers, they don't have taste, they don't know how to lead a nation, they need more experienced, Europeans to come in and tell them what to do and how to think. So Martha, who is with George several times throughout the war, she is doing everything from sewing socks or knitting socks rather for soldiers at Valley Forge all the way up to ensuring, you know, President Washington is wearing the latest fashions and making sure that um, to help establish some of those norms of the presidency. But something like this would have been imported from England, and these were very much in vogue uh, just before and during the American Revolution. Just kind of wrap it up there, and thanks for joining us again. Special shout out to Mr. Grant, who's watching from Tiffin, Ohio. But thank you for joining us. And anything else, Rayanne?
No, no. I think that's great. We will do another one later this summer, probably early August. So be on the lookout for a notice about that soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining.